The time is just gone 8:44 a.m. as we continue with the broadcast this morning. Now, we have been part of the Abir Zayad campaign at Salam Media, having brought her here to South Africa across the length and breadth of South Africa, highlighting the plight of the people of Jerusalem, of Al-Quds, and also Abir, to a large extent, has empowered people with a lot more information, a lot more knowledge, but also at the same time, this passion and this desire to stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine, people of Al-Quds, who have been repeatedly have been under attack by the settlers, by the Zionist occupation in more ways than one. We know what has taken place in the month of Ramadan. And now we are talking about an event which Abir also alluded to, talking about the Flag March, Flag Day, where you see thousands of illegal settlers descending on Jerusalem and inflammatory in more ways than one, provocative. It's a provocative march to humiliate the people of Palestine, led by genocidal politicians and also under heavily armed protection when they descend into Jerusalem, chanting slogans like "Death to the Arabs," and these are thugs. Banging on Palestinian homes, on their properties, and telling them that they have no place in Palestine. And this is the reason why we are talking to Professor Usuf Chikte, and he is with the Palestine Solidarity Campaign coordinator with the PSC. Professor Usuf Chikte, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam, and I'm very delighted to be here on this important topic and to carry on the work that Abir Zayad has initiated in increasing our understanding. And you've raised some very important points. The Palestinians, today is the Flag March. We in our time in South Africa had the Van Riebeeck festivals. We had the Dingaan celebrations. These were all religiously infused, triumphant colonial constructions to emphasize the dominance of the colonial power. And today we're going to have racism, colonialism in full display, celebrating and justifying the conquest, the seizure of Jerusalem from the Palestinians, the occupation of Jerusalem, the illegal occupation of Jerusalem, the illegal annexation of Jerusalem, and the subjugation and suppression of Palestinians within it as the continuing Nakba unfolds in Jerusalem itself. What do I mean by that? Jerusalem is central to the ethnic cleansing of what the Zionists have in mind. They want, as we know full well what has happened in Al-Aqsa, and they have difficulty because of the resilience of the Palestinian people and the steadfastness in ethnically cleansing that. As it is an important symbol of our existence, of the Palestinians' existence and presence, and it defies the logic that the Zionists have. It was a people without a land, for a land without a land without the people, for a people without the land. So that is its history, and it wants to erase that history, and it wants to erase it in a triumphalist, colonialist sense. So they're going to march in their wards, in the hundreds, and the estimates are that there will be 100,000 people marching there. But they not only march, but they want to instill terror. They want to march to enforce the imagery, the symbols, the Israeli flags, their presence. The Palestinians remain unvanquished in all this, and they are going to resist it. And we must support them. You said that we must stand in solidarity with them. More than solidarity, we need to provide protection mechanisms. The international community, the world, civil society needs now from international solidarity to provide protection mechanisms so that they can be prevented from these monsters that Zionism has created over the last 100 years. There was a famous thing in a trial in Jerusalem a couple of many years ago, just after the Second World War. Eichmann, was held as accountable for the war crimes he committed again in the hideous practices of the Second World War and the Holocaust. But it seems, and Eichmann was in the dock, but it looks today as thousands Eichmanns released in Jerusalem. And this time, Eichmann is not in the dock. He is become the prosecutor. He's come in the form of Gitter, Ben Gitter and Smotrich, the internal security ministers and the administrative finance ministers in charge of the occupation. So we're going to demonstrate today. We want to stand in solidarity in real time with the Palestinians from this part of the world. And we are going to tell the Palestinians we stand in solidarity with them. But more important than the solidarity with the Palestinians, and as equally important, we want to tell the local Zionists who aid and abet this kind of ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. We want to tell them that we are going to hold you accountable, that we are going to hold you accountable in terms of South African law for the war crimes that you aid and abet. As the African Zionist Federation, the Jewish National Fund, the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, and the allies, the African Friends of Israel also. They do it with impunity. They amplify the apartheid messages that are being spewed in Israel into South Africa. And they restrict our freedom to speak out against injustice. They restrict our freedom to stand in solidarity with the Palestinians. And they restrict, they demonize us. They cast us with slurs. So that is what we're going to do. We're going to tackle the local forces here in South Africa. And in Cape Town, they are found in a nest in Hatfield. That's where they organize from. And we need to unveil and unmask them. You know, these groups, I often say that Zionism is to Judaism what ISIS is to Islam. And these Zionists in South Africa must be exposed. So it's an important day, Mr. Wadi, for us to stand in solidarity. But let us remember, in terms of what Abir has also said, for us, Al-Aqsa, Jerusalem, is central to the struggle for freedom and justice. Without Al-Aqsa, there is no Al-Quds for us and for Palestinians and for us. Without Al-Quds, there is no Palestine. And without Palestine, there is no justice. And without justice, there is no peace. So we are going to fight for that peace on the streets of Cape Town today. And I'm so glad that you've highlighted this issue. It's called the Flag March. It's to celebrate the conquest and the illegal conquest and occupation and annexation of Jerusalem.
Yes, and also, Prof, all the message that came through loud and clear from Abir, and she raised these concerns, talking about how this march is being used by fascists, by racist, nationalistic people, but also at the same time looking at it from a state, from the Israeli government, because this is sponsored by the Israeli government. The protection that they offer to the settlers as they come with the inflammatory messages that we speak about, and this is going through the Muslim culture as well. So this is provocative in every way whatsoever. And talking about, them celebrating 1967 when the old city was captured. And the point that Abir had made is, we know that this is aimed at Muslims as far as the flag march is concerned. But she also mentioned a very interesting statistic in terms of how the population, the Christian population, had actually dwindled in Jerusalem. She says in 1948 it was 40% in Jerusalem, 20% in 1967. Now the Christian population is 2%. So the aim with these type of inflammatory slogans and the marches is to reduce the Muslim population as well. And this is what Abir was saying, that they have stood steadfast in their quest not to move out of that old city. And again, tying in what she's been saying over and over in her presentations, the longer term plan for for Jerusalem as far as the Zionists are concerned, and also the long-term plan for Masjid al-Aqsa in a complete takeover of Aqsa?
We know from our own struggle what happened with the Group Areas Act. We found ingenious ways to hang on, to go to the courts, even though the courts were against us. So the similar thing is happening. The ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Jerusalem is taking place through various means, through threats, through evictions. And we are so familiar with Yaqub, who said, if I don't steal your land, somebody else is going to steal your house, to Muna al-Kurd. So this theft is continuing brazenly, openly, and if they can't do it by open theft because of the resistance of the Palestinians, they use municipal laws, they use zoning practices, and they use demolitions. So they issue demolitions around it. They also impose severe penalties where they expel people if they smell that, if any actions that they do is considered in their eyes or illegitimate or illegal or in the form of against the Jewish supremacist state. So they've used all these laws, but it's difficult to distinguish between the civilian society, the military, and the Israeli politicians in terms of what they are saying. Ben Gvir, what he says is very, is in tune what the Israeli settlers are saying. What Smotrich is saying about there are no Palestinian people is the same of what you read earlier on, we will erase you, we will burn your villages. And he said he made some horrible statements around the pogrom in Hawara. So it is true that they work in concert, but for me, it's so difficult to distinguish between the armed civilian population, the armed militias, and the armed security forces, occupation forces of Israel. And it begs the question, in a situation of war, how does one treat this? And the Palestinians have no option but to defend themselves against all of these groups. They have the right to resist, and they've asked us to match their bravery and the resistance in terms of what we can do. So the protection that we need to offer them, the articulation of what they need to say, it's very important. We had a saying in South Africa, a song, you will remember that, we shall not be moved. Because of the Group Areas Act, and it won't last, because this is they need to create these myths about themselves, about their triumphs, about how rooted they are to the soil, which they are not, in order to sustain themselves, because everything else is failing around them. The House of Zion is collapsing. And we need to ensure that we accelerate that collapse by standing in solidarity with the spearheading of what the Palestinians do in asserting the reclamation of Jerusalem in its entirety, of Al-Aqsa in its entirety, of Jerusalem in its entirety, and of Palestine in its entirety. So I think you are absolutely right. We must be aware of the different mechanisms that they have employed, and they use the courts also. What kind of law is that? When these foreigners invade your home, and then you must appeal to the courts, but the courts are also by foreigners, by settlers, occupied by them, and their laws are also in the interest of the despotic colonial rulers. So, but nevertheless, they use these courts, but the courts alone are not going to be sufficient. They need the support of us in terms of this to drag them to the ICC, for the ICC to make a pronouncement, for the IJC, International Court of Justice, to make a pronouncement on the illegal annexation. And it was similar during the Second World War in Germany. They called it the Anschluss, the annexation of Polish territories. And the world Chamberlain treated the Germans the same way as the world is treating Netanyahu now. in that there is a form of appeasement, and we cannot appease this monster of Zionism as it is expressing itself in Israel. We were creating the similar conditions as our forebears created in the Second World War. So the Anschluss must stop. The Anschluss must stop. The apartheid must stop. The appeasement must stop. Thank you.
Well, certainly, Prof. And, we're talking about the collapse of the House of Zion, and hopefully in our lifetime, we will see that, and we will see that collapse, and we will see the freedom of Palestine, inshallah, in our lifetime. I'm sure, you and I can engage a lot more, but unfortunately, time is against us. But for now, we thank you, Prof, for taking time out and being with us right here on As-Salam Media. We wish you all the best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam. Just one last thing. We're going to be in Hatfield Road this afternoon at 1 o'clock between 1 and 2, demonstrating against this false flag march. Thank you.
Professor Usuf Chikte with us this morning, and with the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, which brings us straight on to 9, and we are running late, but this interview was absolutely necessary, and we're going to go for a break. We'll be back.